Well, while they're getting that set up, I figured I'd introduce myself. I'm Emily Klarquist. I'm from Washington State University. I'm a postdoc, and I work at the USDA Quality Lab. And I was mentored by Sean Finney until last week, so we're kind of in turmoil, and everything's changing day by day. So we'll see when I get back what the new structure will be. But I'm still there, and Alicia is still there, and all our cultivar testing is still going forward. So I'm here because Kim couldn't be here. She's part of the Fiber Coalition, and she asked me to present this data on the Arabinoxylan variation in the regional nurseries that collaborators sent in. And so that's what I'll be talking about today. So a brief presentation outline. I was asked that it would be interesting to look at what the variation's been reported in previous literature. So I did a brief literature review, and then we're going to go over that, and then I'll get into the regional nurseries reporting what those values were. And if there's time, sharing on the current work that's being done at WSU, and then some, I say historical data. This is from Sean's master's thesis 20 years ago, so I feel bad calling it historical, but he's not here. Sorry, Sean. And then just some conclusions. Oops. So what I did, because I am not somebody who's been working with Arabinoxylan, so this was really new for me. So I kind of did a crash course in educating myself. But I have conducted scoping reviews. So I went into the Web of Science database and did a broad search term, wheat plus Arabinoxylan, extracted all of the references. There was about 900. And then I did a title abstract screening with the Rayan software online. This is a free software. It allows you to do title abstract screening. And what I really wanted to pull from it is kind of breeding peer-reviewed primary research. So I wasn't focused on projects looking at the microbiome or human clinical trials, arabinoxylans through the baking process, just looking at flour, total arabinoxylan content. So what I found was about 10 publications. I'm sure I missed some, but I think this gives a good overview of what the ranges are, and this kind of lines up with what's been reported in review papers that I've also seen. So I classified the studies as QTL, GWAS, or just characterization, so they were just looking at historical or modern varieties. The origin of the germplasm. So we have one from the US. This also included some US lines in it. The class or market type, so because a lot of these were outside the US, they don't use the same market class system, so a lot of them were just characterized as bread wheat. We did have one that was a hard spring wheat from the CIMMYT, and this is actually the same method that we use in our lab. And then we had one white winter wheat from China, and then the US was looking at hard red spring wheat. And this is the number of genotypes that they were looking at. So this was the real population, and then the GWAS. And then the colorimetric method. Because I'm not familiar with the methods, I didn't go into differentiating the discrepancies or differences and nuances in them. So they're either GC or colorimetric. This one was different from the method that we used. This was a method from 1988, Hashimoto. And I did talk to Sean about that, and because these values, this was a refined flour concentration, seemed a bit high to me, and he agreed, and he said that that method tends to overestimate total arabinoxylan content. So this is the column for the arabinoxylan content. I realized I didn't put the units on there. This is milligrams per gram. I do apologize. And then if it has an asterisk, this is the arabinoxylan content for refined flour, and then if it's in gray and there's no asterisk, that is whole meal arabinoxylan content. So as you can see, excluding Argentina, maybe they know what they're doing down there, who knows? The ranges are typically what's reported in reviews, about 15 to high 20s. I've seen ranges between 10 and 30 in reviews, so it lines up with what has been previously reported, and then whole meal flours about double, going up to a max of about 90 milligrams per gram. And I'll have the references at the last slide if anybody wants to take a photo, and I can also send you the reference list if you want it as well. So these are the regional nurseries that we looked at. So some acronyms, because everyone uses really long names in these programs. So we have the Western Regionals, the hard and the soft. So those are grown up in the PNW. And then we have the Southern Regional Performance Nurseries, which I think in this, the samples we got were primarily grown in Colorado. And then the Uniform Eastern and Uniform Southern Soft Red, I believe is correct. I didn't have specific locations, so these are just labeled UES, USS for those locations. And then a breakdown of the nurseries. So we had genotypes ranging lowest in the hard wheat nursery at 18, the most was in the Southern Regional Performance at 50. We had 1 to 3 environments. These also were the reps, so there was no within environment replication. So the UES and USS, I did not conduct an ANOVA analysis, so these are just going to be reported summary statistics. I also chose checks on my own, so hopefully those are okay. I chose Klarquist because they were both in the Western Regional Hards and then the Southern Regionals. And then Matson is a really, it's in almost all of our pedigrees for our modern varieties, so I used that for our softs. And then Hilliard was the only line replicated between the uniform nursery, so I used that. And that was just to give a base start so we could look at the changes. And then I conducted an ANOVA on all 3 of those nurseries, and then if it was significant for a variety, I did pairwise comparisons between the genotypes. So I thought it would be helpful to look at all the data at the start and at the end all together. It was already previously said, but like the hards are coming in higher as expected for Arabinoxylan content, lower for the softs. So that's nice when your data follows what's previously reported. Nothing weird is happening. The standard deviation was quite small for our soft winter nursery. Things were close to the mean, the range. And then I reported the max here since we're looking to increase the Arabinoxylan content. So the highest value was found in the Southern Regional Performance Nurseries. And then again, if you forgot, need a reminder, number of genotypes and environments that we analyzed. And I will say, this is in milligrams per gram, and this is on an as-is moisture basis. We haven't collected moisture data on it. I am doing that when I get back, and I can update these numbers for you all as well, and the analysis. Western regionals, so this, we're just going down the list. They'll all be similar, slightly different. So variety was significant, location was not. We see the locations here, Genesee, Pendleton, Pullman had more of a spread here, but then when you look at the averages, it really condenses around the mean. And a lot of these are falling within that 19 to 21 milligrams per gram. So these are the mean estimates of each of the lines with their confidence intervals. So this is kind of the interval at 95% confidence where you believe that true population mean is going to be found. So if you don't have overlapping confidence intervals, they're likely to be significantly different. And so we had actually quite low lines in this nursery that we might want to ignore for Arabinoxylan work. And I put this horizontal red line here and marked the Klarquist because you'll see later in my a done it test where I compare it. This is kind of the check I chose. And the checks have all done really well in each of these nurseries, so it'll be hard to beat. But I think if we add another year, we'll get better precision in our mean estimates and might even find that location is significant. Up here, HSD, that's a two-key pairwise comparison, so determining if a significant difference is occurring between each of these treatment means. So for that to be significant, we would need to have a 5.5 milligram per gram difference at that significant level, and that's about a 28% difference from the mean of this nursery. So again, I think adding another replication will help improve our precision. And just because we want numbers here, so this is the letter grouping from the Tukey analysis. The top varieties, Klarquist looking great. I spoke with Alicia. This is actually a new Oregon line, so we don't know much about it right now. But all these were above 20 milligrams per gram. And this is what I was talking about with the check. So Klarquist at this value, so I set it to 0. I did a Dunnett test, which is a t-test between each of these lines to Klarquist at an alpha of 0.05. And these two, again, were significantly different, but there was no significant difference between Klarquist and all these other varieties. So now we're on to the Western regional softs. Here, variety was not significant. I'm not surprised because the range was so low. Based off our quality council that we had in Portland 3 weeks ago, I learned that, and repeated today, Arabinoxylan is bad for cookie quality. So we're probably, if not directly, indirectly selecting for low Arabinoxylan content. But this was also grown in Genesee and Pullman. And as you can see, they cluster around that mean, and they're falling between 15 and 17 milligrams per gram. So here's the mean estimates in the confidence intervals, and I didn't want anybody to freak out, but there was a missing data value. So since we only had 2 environments, we couldn't estimate confidence intervals. And again, our check, Matson's doing great for Arabinoxylan content. And here are the averages. So yeah, the max was 18.63 in this nursery. And then the percent difference, so we went down to minus 20 to about a positive 10% change from Matson. And because ANOVA was not significant, I didn't do the additional analyses. So now our largest nursery, and I think the one that's most valuable to you all. So variety was quite significant. I mean, we had a lot of reps and a lot of varieties, so I'm not surprised there. Location was not significant. And in previous studies, you know, the G by E is typically minimal. Variety and genotype tends to have a larger effect especially for total Arabinoxylan, so I'm not surprised there. I don't know why it's so blurry on this screen, but this is Akron location, Julesburg, Fort Collins, and then the averages of all the entries there. And here are the mean estimates with the confidence intervals. Again, Klarquist shining bright. We had a few, this is a quite high mean, but quite variable across the 3 environments. So again, if we have additional replications, we'll get a better estimate of that mean. I think also once we get the dry weight, this could also be an artifact of the moisture content across the varieties as well. So that precision should improve once we update the values. And I know that figure is hard to see, but these are the top 5 varieties, and the letter groupings were assigned using the 4.93 milligrams per gram for the mean significant difference at an alpha of 0.1. So you'd need about a 28% difference between the 2 treatment means to detect. In this Tukey, so I probably should explain this earlier. So the Tukey is making pairwise comparisons between all the lines, but that Dunnett specifically doing t-test between the check and the line. Okay, so that's where we're getting a little bit better power. So this is kind of a catch-all general analysis that I'm adding. Thank you. So when we just look at Kharkov with these other varieties, we have quite a few that are significantly lower than Kharkov, quite a few that are not significant. So again, I think additional replication would be nice because the range and the effect size is so small. And then these weren't replicated, so I'm just sharing the summary statistics of these. I believe these are soft red nurseries, and these are similar in their range to our soft whites. So this is UES and USS. And here we have the histogram. I marked where Hilliard was on this. Again, the check looking amazing. And even though I couldn't do an analysis, I did want to share the top 5 performing lines with you all. And I think we are out of time, but real quick, I can send these slides, so it's fine. Aisha's going to be releasing a GWAS using a magic population. If you don't know what that is, this is a modified magic population, I should say. So they had 7 founder lines that were taken from these nurseries, so they're elite breeding material, crossed to a hard red spring variety Hollis. They took the F1s, they intercrossed them, and then they repeated that 2 times. If you know a magic population and a NAM, it's kind of a blend of the two. So it removes the population structure while having a high resolution like you get with GWAS. So she's going to be using these 173 F6 lines to map grain xylose, or the same thing as total Arabinoxylan in this population. And she phenotyped these and grew them out in Pullman and Genesee in 2023. She'll also be looking at phenolics in this population. She's graduating this spring, so the data will be out soon. And this is just to show no correlation was found between the grain xylose and 1,000 kernel weight, which has been reported previously. And then Sean's historical data. I just thought it was interesting, and I wanted to, just talking with Alicia and stuff, show the importance of looking at flour and not whole meal. You would think that they would correlate really well, but they don't. So Sean had measured whole meal and flour, total Arabinoxylan in his lines. There were about 27 varieties. And the correlation coefficient was quite low. And once you get into these high values, you see quite large deviations. And we have a high throughput way to mill at our lab, making it easier to get that refined flour for this analysis, which I'll show in the next slide. And then I also wanted to show, since we only took total Arabinoxylan content, it's likely correlated pretty well with the water extractable. At least in this population it was. But that's something that I think we're going to add to our analysis. It's a part of the phenotyping process. We just didn't do it this time around. So this is our high throughput micromill. This is made quite a bit ago. Sean might have talked about this, but we're working with our machine shop to get plans to make a new one. So if anybody is interested in getting this allows you to mill 100 to 500 samples a day. And you can get refined flour, mids, and bran. So you drop in 4 samples. It's almost like a hedgerow planter down into the chute. These are roller mills, and then there's a sifter, and then there's 2 little holders. Sorry, I'm almost done. That gets the flour, refined flour, or the flour, the mids, and the bran. And then you can do the Arabinoxylan content. Mike Pumphrey uses this on his F5s to screen for the SRCs. And with that, you guys can read everything else, and I will finish up with questions. Thank you. Yeah. I just think it was underpowered because we only had 1 rep per location. So I think there was likely an effect. There was some that were almost close to 0.1. So I think if we had another year, we'll see that. And especially year usually has a larger effect than planting across locations in the same year. And I know Genesee and Pullman for us, those are very similar management systems and rainfall patterns. So I think the environments were quite similar. I can't speak on the regionals. Yeah.
Now you basically, for hard wheat, basically you are 2%. So the total, the AX. So what's your target? How high you can go?
How high can we go in Arabinoxylan content? That is somebody else's question, because I've only been reading about Arabinoxylan for like 2 weeks.
Emily, nice talk. Thank you. A constructive suggestion on the SRPN samples. Rather than use 3 Colorado environments, I would have more comfort with this data if you had used the flower from the multi-location mega environment composites that the Regional Quality Lab generates. They composite sets of samples from specific targeted groups of environments, and they mill, with the serious mill in the hard wheat quality lab, and samples of those flowers should be available in the quantities you need for this.
Yeah.
And those would be a more robust set of samples for the hard winter wheat.
Yeah, thank you. I'll let Kim and Alicia know. Because
Yeah.
I when I first got this, I thought it was Akron, Ohio.
Questions, I want 2 questions.
Oh, yes.
So the second one, I'm concerned, and maybe you can make me feel better about this, but I'm concerned for the rationale on the magic population because all of those donors are from SMTA germplasm, and our breeders in the United States don't have freedom to operate with traits identified from those trait donors unless they were in the country pre-2010. If they were in the country pre-2010, we're okay. But
They might actually be, because that population was developed by Scott Holbert for disease resistance, and I think it was my master's.
I think that's really important to clarify the freedom to operate with the derivatives of the magic populations.
Okay, thank you.
I only have one question. Emily, nice talk. Pulling all that data together, that's really a lot of work. Were there what would be the gaps in those data sets? Were there something you really wanted to see that you didn't see in that?
More replication would have been nice.
When you say replication, okay, I'm asking a second question, but this is really a follow-up, so it's not really a second. When you say replication, are you talking environments, within locations, technical reps?
Within location, and then as Mary was saying, maybe a bit more variation or differences between the Pullman and Genesee I was most familiar with. Okay. And they're like 20 minutes away from each other. Yeah.
Great, thanks for putting it together.
But mostly because Kim was gone once I got the data, and I think she had coordinated the project. So I was really just, looking at names and numbers and not really understanding where they came from.
Yeah, but you spent time inside of it. There's no substitute for that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So for your SRPN data, you showed the top 5 across 3 locations from Colorado. So is 10-107 always the number 1, or it changed across just those 3 locations?
That was just averaged across environments.
Right.
So I didn't show which ones were the top performing per environment. Okay. So that will likely change a little bit. And I think this data is public. I will check with Alicia, but I was going to update the analysis and everything and then send it to Rod or Catherine, and we can get it out to everybody. Thank you, everybody.
All right. And I just realized, as you were presenting, Emily, I realized the reason you probably haven't run the NRPN from this year is because I didn't reply to an email from Alicia asking me what some of the abbreviations were. So I vaguely remember this email from back in December, and now that it's February, I'll go ahead and answer that, and then you'll have some more hard red winter germplasm.